Welcome to Dream, Declare, Deliver with your host, Chris Gorell. Join us each week as we explore how to live a life by design by applying the tools and techniques of emotional intelligence and personal transformation. Here's Chris.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Dream, Declare, Deliver, the Learning to Feel version. And I'm happy to have with me on the call today Candace Sogren, who's my co-author and, one of my best friends. Candace is a senior executive in the financial world, leader of finances and kind of rainmaker. She's a trained lawyer by trade, and has been an angel investor, has been in all kinds of C-suite positions, but I know her best as my co-author on Typhoon Honey, which we wrote together over a period of about a year and a half, and it really cemented our relationship and really, took us to a whole deeper level. So Candace, thank you so much for coming and joining me today. What we want to talk about is some of the concepts in my latest book, Learning to Feel, have to do with why do we need our emotions? It seems as though in modern times, we almost want to hold emotions at arm's length and not feel. Some of us don't want to feel because of the gravity of the stuff that's going on in the world around us, the violence and terrorism and mass shootings and all that kind of stuff. It's just too hard to feel sometimes. But in your opinion, what's the advantage of having a deep emotional awareness and emotional, what we will call emotional intelligence, which is the ability to not only be aware of it, but respond effectively to it?
Such a good question, Chris. I'm so happy to be back with you on your podcast. This is so sensitive and so raw for me right now because I'm in it currently. I literally just hosted 9 of my employees at my house for the last few days. And I told them, keep your laptops at home. That's not what this is about. And we spent 2 days talking about trust and love and fear. And I was teaching them how to call each other forward if they were operating from fear. I asked them to each share their entire life stories. We cooked family meals together. And the purpose was I recognized that my employees are afraid, they're burnt out, and they don't know what their why is. They don't know why they're coming to work every day.
Right. And
that's what I think is missing when leaders are not emotionally aware or tapped in, then what suffers is their employee health. Their employee satisfaction. There's lack of trust among their teams because if we can't share all of ourselves with one another, then we're all just robots.
Yeah.
We're all just
so it wasn't a bonding experience. It really was a skill awareness kind of deep dive for them to get to know that language with each other. What a brilliant thing to do.
And I actually asked my team, I said, what's missing from our team right now? Confidence, competence, or conviction? And they all said conviction. And I said, that's all emotion. That's emotional intelligence, right? So we spent time on why are we here? Why do we show up to work every day? Why did we say yes to this job? Why do we put our families to the side and work sometimes until midnight? What's the purpose? And we all got something that we could care about, but it took us some time. It took us several hours to get there.
Yeah, because I don't think business is set up to work that way. To have emotional awareness. We tend to make it all about the business. Long ago I did a TED Talk and the starting line of the whole TED Talk was about this scientist who once said, if we could just speak in equations, we'd all be a lot better off because we wouldn't have those emotional things getting in the way. And, and nothing could be further from the truth, could it? It's because we communicate with other humans, this way. with our emotions, with our eyes, with our hearts.
It's so funny to hear you say that. So there's two stories that you just triggered. One is that when I was a salesperson, just an individual contributor, my boss came to me and he said, "Candace, you're our best salesperson, but nobody likes you. Like, you're really not doing great in interpersonal stuff." And I said, if I would do great at my job, if I just didn't have to deal with other people, and that, and I said, you just need to get me a SWAT team of like 2 other people, and that's all I have to deal with, and I'll go sell you everything you need. And at the time, like, that's what I thought I needed. And then, I went to a UC Berkeley leadership retreat, and at the leadership retreat, they talked about vision, task, and relationship. And they said, what most lower level employees focus on is task, and what many CEOs focus on is vision. But what the key to successful middle management is relationship. And like, if that's missing, that's a really important layer in leadership teams, is the relationship layer. So one other story that was triggered is that in a previous job that I had, our CEO called in all the senior management. We had just had a layoff, and he called in all the senior management, and he said, "I wanted to let you know that you are not allowed to talk about anything that is happening in the media, in the world. We are not a social club." So he says this right after we had a layoff.
Oh my gosh.
And I said, "I'm sorry, but I disagree with you. Like if one of my employees is affected by George Floyd or something else that's happening in the world, we are definitely going to talk about it." They put, employees put so much of their time and energy into their jobs, and like, if they're hurting, there gets to be a place for that. But I was like, wow, I'm in organizations that are literally saying we're not a social club and you're not allowed to talk about emotion.
Right. It's funny because, long ago and far away, I was SVP of a consulting firm that did corporate outplacement. And part of my job was, day of the downsizings, when people were let go, to bring everybody into the room and say, and just cathartic, and say, what's coming up for you, and allow people the space to emote and to talk about survival guilt. A lot came up. How do we relate to and talk to our friends who are now no longer here? Are we allowed to do it? Just all the confusion that was, embedded in a major downsizing like that, brought so many feelings up to the surface, and it was so important to do that. So what happens then when you have somebody like that, or when you have an organization that is not emotionally aware or even adept at dealing with the emotional side of human beings? What happens?
Well, at the most rudimentary level, people quit.
Yeah, no kidding.
But at that organization that said we are not a social club, within a month of that announcement, 6 vice presidents in this organization all quit on the same day. I was one of them, and 5 others quit alongside me. My boss quit a month later, and every C-suite person has quit except for the CEO at this point. And so like, major turnover happens, and the reason for this is why I ended up having all of my employees at my house last week, is that there's no trust. Yeah, there's no trust. If you don't care about me as a human, then I don't matter to you. I am just here to punch a clock or to push a widget. Yeah. And if that's all I'm here for, I can get so much more somewhere else. Yeah. And so that's what I think happens to organizations, is they fall apart.
Well, they fall apart because the key ingredient, the cement that holds us together, is trust.
Trust.
And there's 2 kinds of trust. There's that big capital T trust where, I fundamentally don't trust you as a person. There's also another layer of trust that I call, lowercase t trust, which is, I don't understand you. I trust you as a person, maybe, I'd let my kids stay at your house or something like that, but I don't understand where you're coming from. And that a lot is again, when you have that get together and have people start learning each other's style and backstory, then what comes out of their mouth is more trustworthy because we have a context for it. And so, kudos to you for doing that. That is brilliant management, so.
The one other thing too is like what happens to the people within an organization, the lower level people who are suffering at the cost of the leader who is not emotionally intelligent. I'll just give an example from my personal life. So I've had a lot of struggles this year with trying to bring a new child into our family. And at one point I was in a custody battle earlier in the year, and I had told my boss about it, and we lost the custody battle. And, a couple of days later, we got into an argument, and he wanted me to fire an employee. I didn't want to do that. And so I said, I think your issue is with me. And he said, you're just so emotional. You're all over the place. Now, mind you, this was like a day after the custody.
Right.
Now, what happened as a result of that is, he said, I won't fire you, but I'll accept your resignation. And I was like, I don't resign. So we ended up in this very weird
dynamic.
Dynamic. And so while he didn't fire me and I didn't quit, I ended up having a miscarriage shortly thereafter. And I didn't feel safe to talk about it with him. So I flew to Miami to be at a conference with him 2 days after I had surgery for my miscarriage. And luckily we now have a COO who cares. And I said, just so you know, I no longer feel safe as an employee. I don't feel safe. I can't be human here. I can only be a robot. And so there's lack of safety too for employees.
Right. And who was it? Alexander the Great says, so go the leaders, so go the followers. When there's this lack of trust among the senior leaders of an organization, that bleeds all over the organization itself, and none of the employees will feel safe. None of the employees will feel trust with each other or across divisions in the organization. It just bleeds all over everything. And then you get only automatons, pushing widgets and buttons and doing that. But there's the essence of critical thinking is thinking outside of this is my lane, and saying what's over in this lane and what's over in that lane, and how does what I do affect either of those? There's just, blinders at this point, because I'm just going to put my head down and do my job because it's the safest way I can stay safe. Right. Mm-hmm. So there's essential, there's like evidence that emotional intelligence is essential in leadership. That we must train leaders. We must, and it's funny because I have the belief that one of our most original elements in evolution as the human species was emotion. It's seated in the deepest part of our brain, in the most primitive part of our brain. It's how we stayed alive, and it's how we bonded together, because as a species, we're not really strong enough to survive a battle with a lion or a tiger or a bear or anything like that. But as a team, we can. We're able to. So part of our bonding as humans to create society and survival, and part of our basic survival instinct is that we have this tool, this ability to feel and experience and translate experience into direction. So what's available when you have emotional intelligence? How does that help you guide yourself and you too emotional person, how does that help you?
Well, it's interesting because having been on the other side of that conversation recently with a CEO, I had choices, right? So I had a choice. I'm a leader as well. I had a choice to quit, and I called you for coaching about this. I had a choice to quit or to stay, and to shift, and I made the choice to shift, largely because I'm the breadwinner of my family and other things, right? But I because I am emotionally intelligent, I was able to step into the shoes of this other person. I was able to understand the extreme stress that they were under that week. And I was able to say, okay, I can have empathy here. I can meet this person where they're at, and I can shift how I'm showing up so that we can continue to coexist. And like knowing how to shift, understanding how to shift, and also just how to speak differently to different populations. When I had my offsite here with my employees, I asked them each to come from ownership about something that wasn't working and what could we count on from them. And one of them said, well, so-and-so and this other team is just awful. And the solve for this is to fix this person. And I said, okay, great. What do you know about this person? And like, what matters to them? Do they like public acknowledgement and praise? And this employee was like, I don't know. And I said, okay, let's pick up and figure out how, because clearly how you're talking to this person is not, because other members of our team do have effective communication with this person. And so I think when you are emotionally intelligent, you're more productive. First of all, you're more efficient. You have more positive relationships. There's trust. And teams are more effective.
Yeah, I want to unpack that because there's a lot that you just covered, So first off, I want to unpack shifting. And secondly, I want to talk about, like how being emotionally aware about ourselves allows us to distinguish between what's ours and what's the other person's so that you can be more effective with that other person in listening to their come from. So let's first talk about, how does emotional intelligence or emotional awareness help you do shifting, and what is shifting to you? Because it is one of the most powerful tools that we as individuals can own, in my opinion.
Yeah. So shifting to me is recognizing when you're up against it in some way. And in that moment, while you're up against it, when you're in the darkest of dark hours, recognizing that there are other paths you can take and choosing one of those other paths. Right. What happened in this particular instance with me was I called a friend of mine who we both know, and she said, "You're addicted to your emotions right now. Like, stop
You're
it."
attached. Yeah.
Yes. She's like, you're like super addicted to your emotions. And this particular person doesn't want emotions. So they're the captain of the ship, get on board. And that feedback allowed me to shift and say, oh, I just won't cry at work. And it allowed me to now move into a space where I can coexist with another person.
Yeah. Yeah. So shifting for me is recognizing when, the emotion has me instead of me having the emotion. And what we also often talk about is that behind each emotion, there's a thought, and behind each thought, there's a belief. And so when I feel like the emotion has me, then I need to look at what is the thought and what is the belief system that's behind that. And then I can choose a different thought. I can choose to say, well, is that belief serving me anymore? Is that a belief that I got when I was a kid? And I was just, trying to protect myself, as a child, up against a mean, nasty world, and does that belief serve me? So I have two choices there that allow me to do something different. When I have a different thought, I have a different set of emotions. So shifting for me is also owning that and being aware of the fact that the emotion has me at this moment, and I can choose, so it's really based on that choice. But it's such a great tool, because what that then allows me to do is the second thing, which I want to unpack for you with it is when I'm aware like that, and I know this is my feeling, it's not coming from somebody else. What does that allow me to do with the other person then? How can I then see into what their, you talked about your CEO who just doesn't want to have feelings at work. There's a why behind that. There's a whole, he's scared of his emotions or something like that. They're afraid of the uncontrollable nature of them. Or I'm able to then listen for that. What do you hear when you do that?
I think there's a shared humanity that I'm able to tap into when I shift. That okay, we're both humans. We're living a human experience. there's something going on for this other person. Can I try to understand what that is? And even if I don't agree with them, and even if I don't condone their behavior, I can still at least identify. And that gives me a new starting point.
Yeah.
And it's really helpful with your employees, or with my employees. Like when one employee was underperforming and I talked to him about it, and he was like, my mom is dying. And he was able to share with me that what's happening, like with in his personal life. And it helped to elucidate for me, like, why his work was suffering. And while that's still not, condoning poor work, I was able to have compassion. And I even said, like, while this may or may not work out at work in this particular instance, because the performance has fallen, you get to go be with your family, like I want you to be with your family right now, whether
that's
it's
where you need to. Yeah. Right.
And so now this person and I have a strong relationship, even though they may not work with me much longer. But they can understand, and I can understand them, and we may work again in another place or another time. So
you're right. I was just a couple of weeks ago, I was conducting a workshop at a men's retreat up in New Hampshire. Had about 25 guys in this workshop. And I was talking about that cycle, that beliefs lead to thoughts, lead to emotions, lead to the feeling. The thing that you see on the surface is, the kind of the tip of the iceberg is the feeling, and then the action that is a result of our feeling this way. So emotions cause feelings, cause actions. Actions produce results, and results feed back into our belief system, either confirming or refuting our belief system, So there's this big circle, and I'm explaining this to them. And I said, so who's gotten an example? And this one elder gentleman, he was maybe about 60 years old or something like that, says, I got an issue. My wife is always picking on me. She's always putting me down. She's always doing this. And, my spidey senses go off when I hear the word always.
Always, always, never. Yeah.
Always and never, right? She never does this. Anyway, so I said, so what is the thought? What's the emotion? And he said, well, I'm angry. And I said, so what's the thought behind the anger? Well, I think she should treat me a certain way. And I said, so what's the belief about you? He said, well, I've never been treated right. I've, like that. So all of a sudden he stops right in the middle of a sentence, and he looked at me and he said, oh my God, this is about me, not her. Like we were talking about before. He said, I'm making it all about her, and it's really all about, I have this belief in my head that, nobody ever treats me right. And so I just make it like that. She's just another one of those, nobody ever treats me right. And he stops again, and he said, you just may have saved my marriage, because I was just done with this whole thing. And I need to go apologize. It's like me. I'm doing this to her because of what's inside me. And so that's the kind of stuff that's available when we unpack the emotion and give it the rightful place of what it's there to do, is to help us, understand ourselves and how we relate to other people. And it is that connection, that you're talking about.
Yeah. Whatever we're upset about in our worlds, we're creating. That's always a big realization.
That's always
when I'm
and that's what's, once we get that, that's what allows us to shift. It's like, oh, I'm creating this. I'm really upset. I'm really stuck right now. And it's my stuckness that's creating this, or my interpretations that are creating this, not the world doing things to me. The world doesn't give a damn about me. The universe is neutral. Information is neutral. Everything is neutral. It just, life is chaos. And I take it all personally, and then my emotions get all trapped up in that, because I'm not allowing my emotions to do the thing that they were designed to do, which is really help me sense my way through, feel my way through life as I'm experiencing it.
Something that's coming up for me, Chris, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, because your book is about learning to feel. And so I've read it and I've loved it. And so I'm curious as to, when are you feeling too much? Like, so you're learning to feel, and now your feelings are driving the bus and not you. So like, how do you decipher when to like let the feeling lead?
That's a great question. And I think it's the fear that a lot of people operate from, is that emotions will drive the bus. And they don't. You know, when you're learning to feel or relearning to feel, because we are born with emotions. You know, babies cry and they are happy and they just emote. You know, that's just their nature. I have
a 4-year-old who's emoting on a daily basis right now.
Yeah, right. And he lives there, right? But we learn how to integrate that as we grow up. What happened is that a lot of us have unlearned or covered over and squashed our emotions. So when we start learning how to feel again, it's not like we're putting feelings in the driver's seat. We're putting them in the right place, you know, because who's the person who's learning how to feel? You know, in Buddhist thought, they talk about, you know, we have two people in us. There's the I and the I see myself as, you know, so there's the I that's seeing myself and the self that I perceive. Our emotions are part of that system, you know, so I can look at my emotions. The real I, the I that is seeing, can look at emotions, and when I understand them and I know where they're coming from, they're useful to me. I know what direction to go. I know that each emotion carries with it a kind of a set of directions. You know, do this, don't do that, you know, go forward, go backwards, go right, go left. You know, they're kind of like directional indicators. And so when we learn the meaning of emotions and what they carry with them, you know, as their message, we become much more, the I that's seeing that, become much more effective. They don't ever take over the bus driver position, you know. If you're reading to Ivor, you have to read, don't let the pigeon drive the bus.
Yeah. I think the one thing too, though, that like, is when there is no outlet for emotion, then emotion is more likely to drive the bus. So we're not a social club, you know, my former CEO, like, it's when we can't talk about things that they get bottled up, that we end up having health problems, that we end up having relationship problems, that we end up, you know, that's when we start to fall apart. And so I actually think the opposite, right? So the more that we talk about emotion, the less power it has over our day-to-day operating. Well,
the less randomness, you know, the less likely it is to just explode in places where we don't need it or want it or where it's not functional, you know. So you're right. You know, we all have emotions, and if we bottle them up, they will, you know, that container will explode at some point. It'll pop out, and you'll have to deal with it then, you know. So if you're not able to be with your emotions, understand them, and work with your own emotions and allow them to speak to you, then they're going to come and speak to you. You know, they will take over, and that's when they're you know, emotions and emotional outbursts become dysfunctional. You know, that they're not useful, and they do get in the way. And I think that's what, you know, the fear that former CEO is operating from is that, you know, he may have gotten burned that way himself, or, you know, there must be something in there that would have him say, no, this is not a social club. We're not going to talk about emotions here. And so, you know, let's put a cap back on a lid on this whole thing. So I guess what I'm hearing you say is there is a power, and I agree with this. There is a power to being aware of your emotions such that you can use them, you know, when they speak to you, what directions they tell you to go in. Is there any other thing that you can say from a leadership position where, you know, what you did, you know, is really, what you did was brilliant with your team?
I'll just give one other example. So I was asked to terminate an employee a few months ago, right when this employee came back from maternity leave. And
Right.
I really pushed back hard. I really pushed back hard.
No
And yes,
kidding.
they were before they went on leave, so I said, I'm going to at least give them 30 days and see how they perform. And
Right.
they were okay. But I thought this, like, I knew I was going to be pushed to terminate this person. But I thought there's got to be a humane way to do this. So I met with this person in person and I said, hey, I think that this is likely going to happen. Please use the next few weeks while you're getting paid to look for another job. You know, like, you have my support. I really want to be supportive to your process here. The person came back and they said, no, I'm doubling down. I'm committed. And I thought, ugh. And so then I started really paying attention to what's happening in this person's life. And her mother broke her hip. She then had no childcare for her child. And so then I said, now's the time. So then I was able to go to her and say, I'm able to give you a severance package so you can be with your child right now. Go be with your family. Like, your mom is hurt. You don't have childcare. Go be with your family. Use this time. And so she was able to see this as a gift.
Yeah,
as like,
right.
for this, rather than, I can't believe you're doing this to me. And so I think there's so much value in being able to really care about a person and what matters to them, such that it doesn't have to be a bad decision. It doesn't have to be the end of the world. It can be something that can be a gift.
Right. Brilliant. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. I love talking with you always, and I really appreciate what you have to offer and what you've taught me in our working together. So I love you dearly. Take care. Have a wonderful day.
Yes.
And
Thank you.
thanks again.